Hello and welcome to another history class with Ado Levatam Job. In this class, we shall be discussing early external influences. A. Contact with North African trade and Islam. 1. The Trans-Saharan trade in the theme pre-colonial Nigeria. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to 1. Discuss the nature of the Trans-Saharan trade, and 2. Describe the items or articles that were traded during the Trans-Saharan trade. With these objectives in mind, let's go into our discussion. Trade simply reminds us of buying and selling, and the exchange of goods for goods is as old as man. This means that trade by barter, as the exchange of goods for goods was called, was an old practice by man in the society. As people could not produce all the goods that is needed for their survival, they met at a particular place, markets, to exchange their goods with people from far and near. When members of a community met to exchange goods, this was known as short-distance trade or home trade. And when carried out in faraway land, it was known as long-distance trade or international trade. In West Africa, one form of international trade that took place in the period before 1800 was the Trans-Saharan trade, and that is what we are going to discuss in this lesson. Before looking at the Trans-Saharan trade, it is only proper for us to look at the Sahara Desert. A desert is simply a dry region, and we can call it an ocean of sand. In Africa, there are two deserts. You have the Sahara Desert and the Kalahari Desert. The Sahara Desert is in the northern part of Africa, while the Kalahari Desert is in the southern part of Africa. This desert was not a barrier to movement because there was actually a trade between the people of North Africa and the people of West Africa in the period before 1800. And that is what we call the Trans-Saharan trade. The Sahara Desert is the largest hot desert in the world. It is located in North Africa and covers an area of 9.2 million kilometer square area. From a very early time, this desert facilitated contact between the people of North and West Africa through trade. Through this trade, the desert became a bridge and not a barrier to transport and communication, and this resulted in economic, socio-political, and religious gains, as we shall see in the importance of the Trans-Saharan trade. Now let's look at the Trans-Saharan trade. The Trans-Saharan trade was the trade between the people of North Africa and West Africa across the Sahara Desert. This trade started about 4,000 to 3,500 BC. That is the period before the birth of Christ. That was when this trade started. However, the volume of the trade was low, meaning that the movement of people and goods across the Sahara was not much compared to what we have in the period after the death of Christ. Furthermore, the use of camels in carrying goods across the Sahara, which was introduced in the 4th century AD, also increased the volume of this trade. Remarkably, this trade, called the Trans-Saharan trade, flourished. By flourish, we mean increased tremendously in the 7th century, and this was after the Arabic or Islamic conquest of North Africa, meaning that after the conquest, a lot of people, goods and services was moved across the Sahara towards the western part of Africa. Having known what is the Trans-Saharan trade, let's now look at the routes of the trade. A trade route can be defined as a road or pathway that traders travel through when going to buy or sell goods at a particular place. There were many routes that traders traveled through during the Trans-Saharan trade. However, we can identify 3 major routes. These are the western route, the central route, and the eastern route. Let's look at them one after the other. The western route covers Morocco through Tagaza to Taodeni, Walata, and ended in Timbuktu. The central route started from Tripoli in Libya and passed through Gadames, Air to Agadez, Katsina, and Kano in present-day Nigeria, while the eastern route began from Tripoli too in Libya, through Fezzan to Bilma, and ended at Borno, still in present-day Nigeria. These were the major routes of the trade. However, there were smaller routes that were not of any importance. Having looked at the trade routes of the Trans-Saharan trade, let's now look at the organization of the Trans-Saharan trade. By organization, we are looking at how the trade was organized. The Trans-Saharan trade was well coordinated and organized by the Berber merchants from North Africa. They organized caravans which crossed from North Africa across the Sahara to West Africa. By caravans, we are referring to the camels or the carts that were used to carry goods during this trade. So the Berber merchants were those that organized the caravans and the traders as they passed through or crossed the Sahara Desert to West Africa. During the journey through the desert, traders tried to avoid sand dunes, and by sand dunes we are looking at a hill of sand because they can easily get lost inside. The Berbers usually hired the Tuaregs, who were very conversant with the desert environment. The Tuareg serves as guide to the traders on this journey across the desert. Initially, the Trans-Saharan trade was carried out through the Bata system. By Bata system, we mean the exchange of goods for goods. But later on, some form of money was introduced. These include cowrie shares and gold dust. Having said that, we have to take note of the fact that the Bata system was inconvenience and of several disadvantages. Let's consider some of these disadvantages of the Bata system. 1. Double coincidence of ones. This means finding someone who has exactly what you are looking for. The Bata system made the Trans-Saharan trade to be difficult and time-consuming, especially in searching or looking for someone who have what you needed. The second problem of the Bata system was measure of value. This means it was difficult to determine the value of goods that was exchanged for other goods. Remember, there was no means of measurement. And take for instance, if someone wants to exchange a camel or a horse for something like salt or gold, to what extent are they equivalent? So the problem of measurement of value made the Bata system to be dropped at some point. And lastly, we talk about store of wealth. The commodities traded during the Trans-Saharan trade could not be stored as wealth for future use. So with these inconveniences and disadvantages, the Bata system was abandoned at some point during the Trans-Saharan trade. And these currencies, notably cowrie shares and gold dust, were introduced until coins and paper money were also introduced at later dates. We have looked at the organization of this trade called the Trans-Saharan trade. Let's now consider the articles or commodities that were traded. In every trade, there are articles or items that are imported and there are those that are exported. During the Trans-Saharan trade, some items were imported into West Africa, while the people of West Africa also exported some items. Let's look at these items, beginning with the imports. During the Trans-Saharan trade, the items brought into West Africa or imported from North Africa include salt, copper, brass vessels, glass beads, cloth, dried figs and dates, cowries share, books, horses, and firearms. On the other hand, the people of West Africa also exported some items or sold out these items to traders from North Africa. These items include gold obtained from the regions of Upper Volta, Upper Senegal, and Upper Niger, slaves used as domestic servants, ivory, honey, kola nuts, and hide and skins. These were the major items exported from the region of West Africa. Having looked at the organization of the trade as well as the articles of the trade, let's now consider the importance of the Trans-Saharan trade. Of what importance was the Trans-Saharan trade? The Trans-Saharan trade was very important. In the first place, it connected the people of North Africa with the people of West Africa. The desert was like a barrier to movement. However, this desert, instead of being a barrier to free movement, became a bridge that facilitated contact and communication between the people of North Africa and their West African counterparts. Next, the Trans-Saharan trade attracted European merchants to the ports of North Africa. That was very important. One article of the trade was gold, and in Europe, gold was in high demand. So merchants or traders normally flocked the ports of North Africa in order to buy gold from them. The desire to control the gold trade pushed Europeans into the exploration of West African coast in the 16th century because gold was produced in several West African cities. So in order to control this gold, Europeans had to explore West African coast in the 16th century. Most importantly, the trade led to the introduction of Islam and Arabic culture in West Africa. This was an important development in the history of West Africa. Islam was introduced by traders from North Africa into West Africa. Furthermore, Islam was introduced alongside Arabic culture. By Arabic culture, we are looking at their ways of life, their education, and other aspects of their culture. Islam itself is a religion and a way of life because it has a code of rules and regulations known as Sharia. So all of this was introduced into West Africa, and it has greatly influenced the lives of people and states in West Africa. Remarkably, it was traders from North Africa who were among the first to embrace the Islamic religion. They persuaded merchants from West Africa to accept the faith. They also preached to the rulers of various West African states. Some of the rulers converted to Islam and made it a state religion. For instance, Mansa Musa promoted Islam as a state religion in the ancient Mali Empire. We have also seen that in Kanem Borno Empire, Islam was also promoted as a state religion. With this, we have come to the end of our discussion. But let's take a quick look at what we have done so far. In this lesson, we discussed that the Trans-Saharan trade was a trade between the people of North Africa and West Africa across the Sahara Desert. Furthermore, we discussed that the trade, which was controlled by the Berbers, featured several articles such as salt, gold, ivory, slaves, and kola nuts. Next, we discussed that the three main routes of the trade were the eastern, the western, and the central routes. Lastly, one importance of the trade to the people of West Africa was the introduction of Islam and Arabic culture. Let's now take some questions to test our knowledge on what we have done so far. Question 1. The Trans-Saharan trade featured many articles. Which of these was not an article from West Africa? A. Salt. B. Gold. C. Ivory. Or D. Slaves. The correct answer is A. Salt. Salt was imported into West Africa during the Trans-Saharan trade. This brings us to question 2. The ancient city of Kano was located on the southern terminus of the dash route of the Trans-Saharan trade. A. Eastern. B. Western. C. Central. Or D. Sudanese. The correct answer is C. The central route. In this lesson, we have discussed the Trans-Saharan trade as one of the early external influences on the people of West Africa. And I want to believe that you can now examine the nature of this trade. Secondly, identify the articles that were traded. And lastly, mention the importance of this trade. especially to the people of West Africa. Thank you and bye for now.